April 18th, 1967. Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. The sun had barely lifted above the canopy, but the air was already thick, humid, heavy, and watching. A 5-man U.S. Marine reconnaissance team led by Staff Sergeant Daniel Hawk Mercer, a wiry veteran of 2 tours, moved through the early morning haze. Their boots sank into the dew-soaked earth as they advanced toward a suspected Viet Cong supply trail. The only sounds were the distant drone of insects and the soft rustle of the elephant grass parting beneath their gear, and then a single crack, not loud, not dramatic, just a sharp pop barely distinguishable from the echo of a snapped twig. Yet Corporal James Riley Walking Point dropped instantly, face first into the red soil. No scream, no gasp, just silence. Contact sniper, get down. Mercer barked, though the team already knew. The shot had come from nowhere. No muzzle flash, no movement, only the suffocating stillness of the tree line ahead. Riley lay motionless, a small, perfectly round entry wound just above his left temple. A clean kill. A sniper's kill. The Marines crawled behind a fallen log, adrenaline roaring through their veins. You could practically feel the jungle pressing in, studying them, deciding who would be next. This wasn't a random shooter. This was the work of the men U.S. troops whispered about over ration cans and cigarette smoke, elite North Vietnamese and Viet Cong snipers' ghosts, who turned the dense jungle into their personal hunting ground. Mercer raised his binoculars slowly, careful not to expose even a sliver of skin above cover. He scanned the tree line. Nothing. Not a branch out of place. Where the hell is he? Private Salazar muttered, gripping his M16 so tightly his knuckles whitened. He's close, Mercer replied. Closer than we want. The world narrowed into a tunnel. Every leaf seemed suspicious. Every shadow felt like a rifle barrel. What the Marines didn't know not yet was that the sniper watching them had been in position since before dawn. He had climbed a banyan tree hours earlier, hauling with him a sandbag, a canteen, and his prized weapon, a worn but deadly Soviet-made Mosin Nagant M91-30, fitted with a PU scope scratched and fogged from years of combat. It didn't matter. At the ranges he favored 200, maybe 300 meters, it was perfectly enough. His name was never confirmed, though U.S. intelligence later suspected he was a seasoned NVA marksman, known only as the Banyan Hunter. He had already studied this patrol, watched their spacing, noted who gave orders, who lagged, who scanned the trees too quickly. And now he waited, confident, patient, unmoving. Mercer's team attempted to reposition. They crawled low, inch by inch, toward a patch of bamboo. The plan was simple: break the sniper's line of sight call in artillery and hold out until extraction. But the jungle had other plans. The sniper fired again. This time it wasn't a kill shot, it was control. A round smashed into the trunk inches from Private Salazar's face, spraying bark into his eyes. He yelped, scrambling for deeper cover. "He's pinning us," yelled Lance Corporal Baker. And he was perfectly. With just 2 rounds, the unseen marksman had immobilized a seasoned Marine fire team. They couldn't advance, couldn't retreat, couldn't even raise their heads for more than a heartbeat. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun climbed higher, baking their gear, fogging their optics, drying their throats. Sweat stung their eyes. Mosquitoes chewed at exposed skin. Still not a sound from the sniper. "He's gonna hold us here all damn day," Mercer muttered. And he was right. This was a classic Viet Cong tactic, one sniper positioned in a hidden tree line or reinforced bunker, locking down entire patrols for hours, sometimes half a day, draining morale time resources. Then a thud somewhere behind them. The Marines froze. Another sniper. An approaching squad, Mercer felt the shift in the air, the sense that the jungle was closing in, tightening like a noose. He whispered, eyes up. "Something's moving." The team raised their rifles, scanning the perimeter, because one sniper was already bad enough. But out here in Quang Tri alone, in miles of dense terrain, there was never just one. The sound that reached Mercer wasn't a footstep or a branch snapping. It was softer, like the hushed brush of fabric against foliage. To a seasoned Marine, it meant one thing: movement, deliberate and close. Mercer pressed 2 fingers to the dirt, signaling his men to stay low. Every instinct screamed that they were being surrounded, stalked by something far more coordinated than a lone shooter. Private Salazar wiped bark shavings from his cheeks, his breath ragged. "Sergeant, is it another sniper?" Mercer didn't answer. He didn't know, and that uncertainty was the worst part. The humidity thickened around them as the jungle fell into a deeper silence. No birds, no rustling leaves, only the distant rumble of artillery from another sector. Then a faint metallic click echoed off the tree line. Baker's eyes widened. Bolt action, same guy. But Mercer knew better. That sound hadn't come from the banyan tree ahead, it had come from their flank. He gritted his teeth. 2 shooters, maybe more. The Marines were no longer dealing with a solitary marksman. They were caught in a planned kill zone, the kind of sniper net the Viet Cong were infamous for. One shooter pinned the patrol. The others crept into position for flanking shots, slowly tightening an invisible cage. Up in the banyan canopy, the original sniper. The banyan hunter shifted his finger off the trigger. He'd watched the Americans freeze. Good. He could take them one at a time, but there was no rush. His comrades were moving into position, and he trusted them. They were disciplined, patient, deadly. Below, Mercer felt the pressure building behind his ribs. They couldn't stay pinned. They had to break out, but even raising a helmet on the end of a rifle was guaranteed suicide. The sniper's accuracy left no gaps. "No chances," Baker Mercer whispered. "Tell me you've got smoke." Baker dug through his vest. 2 grenades. That's it. "Good, we're going to use both." Mercer mapped out the jungle mentally, angles, distances, the shapes of roots and mounds that might hide a prone shooter. He drew on everything he'd learned from instructors at Quantico and from months of hard combat. But the problem was simple and brutal. The enemy could see them and they couldn't see a damn thing. Baker pulled the pin on the first smoke grenade. The fuse hissed. Mercer counted silently, then nodded. Baker hurled it as far as he could. It clattered against a tree and rolled into the grass before erupting into a billowing cloud of gray. Moments later, he threw the second. The jungle swallowed the smoke quickly, but it was enough to mask a retreat if they moved fast. "Back, stay low," Go Mercer ordered. They crawled, sliding through the mud, dragging Riley's lifeless body with them. The smoke forced the snipers to reacquire targets, and even elite marksmen needed seconds to adjust. Then a shot cracked. A round punched into the log they'd been hiding behind just moments earlier. Another shot followed from the flank, high velocity, aimed low, as if anticipating a crawling escape. Mercer felt the hairs rise on his neck. These weren't random shots. The flank sniper wasn't trying to kill them yet. He was correcting their path of movement, pushing them, hurting them. "They're steering us," Mercer realized aloud. "They want us to run a certain way." Salazar's eyes filled with panic. Toward what? Mercer didn't want to guess, but he already had a feeling. Mines, punji pits, booby traps. This jungle was never empty. Ahead, the smoke thinned. Sunlight pierced through in broken beams, shimmering on the tall grass. It was a beautiful scene, peaceful even until a shadow flickered high in the trees. Mercer looked up. For half a second he saw him, a lean figure perched in the crook of 2 branches, rifle resting on a sandbag, his face hidden behind foliage and camouflage paint. Perfectly still. Perfectly balanced. The banyan hunter. Their eyes met just long enough for Mercer to feel the chill. Then the sniper squeezed the trigger. The shot struck inches from Mercer's helmet, chewing a splintered hole into the earth. He ducked behind a tree root, heart pounding. He's got elevation. He's tracking me specifically. Because the banyan hunter didn't aim for the nearest target, he went for the leader. The jungle around them shifted again, another movement, this time closer. Footsteps. Slow. Precise. They were no longer fighting a sniper. They were facing a team, closing in for the kill. The footsteps were so controlled they barely disturbed the undergrowth. Mercer steadied his breathing, trying to isolate each sound. Whoever was approaching wasn't rushing. They were confident, calculated. Close. 2 o'clock. Maybe 30 meters, he whispered. Salazar swallowed hard. Can't see a damn thing. That was the point. The Viet Cong moved through their jungle like water flowing around stones, silent, smooth, and inevitable. From his perch above, the banyan hunter tracked Mercer's last position. He didn't fire. Not yet. He waited for the flanking shooters to tighten the noose. Even at that distance, he could hear them creeping forward, an experienced team working a coordinated trap. Below, Baker grit his teeth. We can't stay pinned. If they flank us any closer, they already have Mercer cut in. We're in a kill box. The men stiffened. A kill box wasn't just crossfire. It was a design, a planned area where every escape route was covered by overlapping sniper lanes. Move left, you get hit. Move right, the same. Stay still, you get surrounded. Mercer scanned the foliage for anything movement, shadow glint. But the jungle was a wall of green, thick and unbroken. A twig snapped behind them. Baker whipped his M16 around finger-tight on the trigger. Movement behind us. Before anyone could fire a round cracked from the tree line. It hit the trunk inches from Baker's head, blowing out a burst of sap. Back shooter locking me down, damn it, Baker hissed. They've got every angle, Salazar breathed. Another click echoed, bolt cycling, cool and unhurried. Mercer knew that sound belonged to the banyan hunter. He was repositioning. Shift, Mercer ordered. New cover now. They scrambled behind a tangle of exposed roots, just as another round zipped through the space they'd abandoned. Riley's lifeless arm dragged behind them until Baker pulled it fully into cover. His voice cracked. We can't carry him if we have to sprint. Mercer's jaw tightened. The jungle didn't care about grief, and neither did the men hunting them. We're not leaving him, Mercer said. Not an inch. The distant sniper fired again, another control shot aimed at the ground, not at flesh. The Americans were being maneuvered like pieces on a board. Salazar's nerves shattered. They're toying with us, Sarge. They could have killed us already. Mercer didn't answer, because Salazar was right. High above, the banyan hunter finally shifted his position. He stood slowly in the crook of the banyan's branches, balancing with a quiet grace. He adjusted his sandbag, moved his rifle with deliberate slowness, and set a new firing lane. One that pointed toward a narrow gap between two massive roots, an escape corridor the Marines might try to use. The flank sniper advanced body low, crawling like a shadow. His SKS rifle crept forward through the grass barrel, barely rising above the blades. The second flanker, armed with a battered French MAS-36, mirrored him from the opposite direction. The Americans were boxed in by expertise honed through years of fighting in the dark, tangled wilderness. Mercer's eyes darted to a fallen branch riddled with bullet holes. A warning. A message. All right, he murmured. Listen up. They want us to run, which means they're funneling us somewhere, toward what Baker asked. Mercer pointed with his chin toward the patch of bamboo ahead. Thick, dense, suspiciously untouched. Trapline, he said. Probably punji pits, or worse. Salazar felt his stomach twist. They're gonna pin us with gunfire and drive us straight into it. Mercer nodded grimly. That was the play. It had worked 100 times before, but not today, not if he had anything to say about it. He wiped sweat from his brow and steadied himself. If they want us to go forward, we go backward. Baker blinked. Double back toward the flank shooters. Mercer gripped his M16. Exactly. They don't expect that. Their whole strategy hinges on us running forward. Salazar looked pale, but the banyan hunter has the whole rear arc covered. Not all of it, Mercer said. He can't cover everything at once, and he's repositioning. That gives us a few seconds, maybe less. A distant rustle signaled the flank team's final approach. On my mark, Mercer whispered. The men tensed, hearts pounding, hands slick with sweat. Mercer raised 3 fingers. 2, 1, move. They exploded from cover, but not forward. They charged straight toward the flank shooters. The first shot screamed past Mercer's shoulder. The second tore through a leaf beside Baker's ear. The third missed entirely, fired too high, too rushed. For the first time, the snipers were reacting rather than controlling. The jungle erupted with shouts in Vietnamese as the flank team scrambled to readjust. And that's when Mercer saw it. A figure rising behind a cluster of ferns, rifle halfway to his shoulder. Game on. The figure behind the ferns moved with lethal purpose. His MAS-36 rifle rose in a smooth, practiced arc. Steady hands, steady breath. Mercer saw the man's eyes first, dark, disciplined, unblinking. Contact front, Mercer roared. The NVA sniper fired. The round hissed so close to Mercer's cheek he felt the heat of it. He dove sideways, mud exploding beneath him as Baker opened up with a burst from his M16. The ferns shredded into green confetti. The MS-36 sniper dropped to a knee, rolling behind a low stump with incredible speed, narrowly avoiding Baker's second burst. Push him. Don't let him get distance, Mercer barked, scrambling to his feet. Salazar moved with him, firing short, controlled shots as he advanced. The MAS-36 shooter snapped off another round, grazing Salazar's sleeve, but the Marine kept charging adrenaline, drowning out fear. The sniper rolled again, disappearing into the undergrowth like a phantom. A second later, he fired from a new angle, precise, deadly, and impossibly fast. The bullet slammed into the bamboo behind Baker, showering him with splinters. "He's repositioning too fast," Baker yelled. "Guy's a damn ghost." But Mercer understood. These snipers trained not just to shoot, but to disappear. Their tactics were born from years in the jungle, learning how to move through it without disturbing a single leaf. Still, they'd disrupted the ambush. They'd broken the rhythm. For the first time, the enemy was off balance. But then a new sound cut through the chaos, a low thump from deeper in the tree line. Mercer froze. That was no rifle shot. It was the sound of someone hitting the ground from above. "Oh no," he whispered. The banyan hunter had dropped from his perch. The elite marksman emerged between two banyan roots, moving with a calm that didn't match the violence around him. His Mosin Nagant hung low in his hands, bayonet fixed. His cheek and forehead were streaked with jungle camouflage mud, blending him into the shadows. His steps were slow measured, like a predator closing in on wounded prey. "Eyes front," Mercer shouted. "He's coming down." The banyan hunter didn't raise his rifle. He didn't need to. He advanced with frightening confidence, as if he already knew how this encounter would end. Salazar fired first, a burst of 3. All missed. The sniper sidestepped smoothly, using a tree trunk for cover, not even accelerating his pace. He brought the Mosin halfway up, then suddenly snapped the buttstock into position. A single crack. Salazar cried out as the round tore through his thigh, spinning him to the ground. Salazar's hit, Baker yelled, crawling toward him. "Leave me." "Keep shooting," Salazar groaned, blood soaking into the soil. Before Baker could get him into cover, a second shot ripped into the dirt inches from his hand, a warning. The banyan hunter was pushing them, shaping their movements with absolute precision. "Mercer," Baker shouted. "What do we do?" Mercer didn't have time to answer, because the flank sniper, the one with the SKS, burst from the foliage to their left, firing from the hip as he moved. Rounds tore through the air, forcing Mercer and Baker to dive apart. The banyan hunter advanced at the same time, tightening the deadly pincer. This was it. The full trap. A two-man closing maneuver perfected in ambush doctrine, one shooter driving the other, cutting off escape. Mercer rolled behind a tangle of roots as rounds snapped past him. He could feel the trap sealing shut. If they hesitated even a second, they were finished. Baker, Mercer barked, suppress left. Baker complied instantly, spraying rounds toward the SKS shooter, forcing him down. Mercer turned his rifle toward the banyan hunter, but the elite marksman was already sliding behind another trunk, repositioning with a hunter's grace. He wasn't hurried, he wasn't flustered. He was steady, deadly, in control. And that terrified Mercer more than the bullets. The banyan hunter's voice drifted across the clearing, quiet, calm Vietnamese spoken to his SKS partner. A command. A signal. A reminder of the plan. The trap wasn't broken. It was tightening. Salazar gritted his teeth, blood pooling beneath him. "Sarge, we're not making it out of this." Mercer shot a look at him. "A hard one. We are. But we have to flip their play." How Baker shouted. Mercer inhaled sharply. There was only one chance. One insane option. We take the fight to the banyan hunter, head on. Baker stared. That's suicide. Not if we move faster than they expect. He peeked around the route. The banyan hunter was shifting again, preparing the clean final shot. Mercer knew snipers, knew their mindset, knew their rhythm. He had to beat the shot by a half-second. On my signal, Mercer whispered, finger tightening on his trigger. We hit him with everything. The air hung still. Breaths were held. The jungle watched. Mercer shouted, "Now!" And they surged forward toward the most feared sniper in Cong Tree. They burst from cover in a violent rush, Mercer charging dead at the banyan hunter. Baker pivoting to lay suppressive fire, Salazar dragging himself behind the roots to avoid the incoming rounds. The banyan hunter reacted instantly. He didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He simply lowered his center of gravity, slid 1 foot back for balance, and raised the Mosin Nagant in a single smooth arc. His motion was fluid, controlled, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Mercer fired first 3 rounds from his M16, snapping through the air. Bark exploded from the tree as the banyan hunter ducked behind it, the shot striking inches from his shoulder. Baker shifted angles, firing high to force the sniper into deeper cover. The banyan hunter didn't retreat. He pivoted, rolling to the right and using the tangled roots as a shield. His boots barely made a sound in the dirt as he brought the Mosin to his shoulder. He fired. Mercer felt the round tear through his sleeve, slicing a burning line across his bicep. He staggered but kept advancing. "Push him," Mercer shouted. The SKS flanker burst from a thicket, trying to catch Mercer's exposed side. Baker spotted him and unleashed a full burst bullets, churning the grass. The flanker ducked low, but 1 round clipped his shoulder, spinning him backward. He crashed behind a tree, clutching his wound. Finally, the Americans had momentum. The banyan hunter's expression didn't change, even as the battle turned chaotic. He stepped backward in small, precise movements, his eyes locked on Mercer like a predator measuring distance and opportunity. Every shift of his rifle was deliberate, every motion clean. But Mercer had already committed. He sprinted the last 10 meters, diving behind a fallen trunk as another Mosin round cracked past his ribs. "Baker," he yelled. "Flank right, keep him pinned." Baker moved through the brush, dodging the SKS flanker's wild shots. His boots slid in the mud, but he steadied himself, firing short bursts to keep both snipers from gaining a clean angle. The banyan hunter leaned out to fire at Baker, but Mercer beat him by a heartbeat. He aimed and squeezed the trigger. 4 rounds spat from Mercer's rifle. The first hit the trunk. The second tore through a vine. The third punched into the dirt near the sniper's knee. But the fourth, it caught the banyan hunter in the upper arm. The elite sniper jerked back behind cover, clutching the wound. It wasn't fatal, but it was the first time anyone had ever seen him bleed. Baker let out a shaky laugh. "We hit him. Holy Sarge, we actually hit him." But Mercer wasn't celebrating. A wounded animal was dangerous. A wounded sniper was something far worse. The banyan hunter pressed his back against the banyan roots, breathing slow and steady. He slid a strip of cloth from his belt pouch and wound it around his arm with calm efficiency. His wound bled steadily, but his hands didn't shake. He chambered another round, and then quietly, almost too quietly, he began moving again. This time he wasn't advancing, he was repositioning, falling back deeper into the jungle, drawing Mercer in, setting a new angle. "Don't chase blindly," Mercer barked, but Baker was already moving. "I can get him. He's hurt." That's what he wants. But Baker pushed forward, heart-pounding adrenaline drowning out caution. He slid around a cluster of trees, weapon raised. A single crack echoed. Baker froze. A dark stain spread across his chest. He staggered once, twice, then collapsed into the ferns. No, Salazar screamed, dragging himself forward, despite his injury. Mercer's entire world narrowed. The banyan hunter had taken a hit and still maintained the upper hand, all with one perfectly placed center mass shot. Baker Mercer crawled toward him, but the crack of the Mosin forced him back into cover. Another near-perfect shot. Only the thickness of a root saved his life. The Banyan hunter spoke again, calm, controlled Vietnamese, likely signaling the SKS flanker to reposition and finish the job. The jungle shifted, leaves whispered, the trap reset itself. Salazar's face twisted in pain and rage. "Sarge, they're killing us, one by one." Mercer's pulse thundered. He weighed their dwindling options. They couldn't advance, couldn't retreat, couldn't call for extraction until they broke free of the kill box. And then Mercer noticed something. A pattern. Every time the Banyan hunter repositioned, he favored one direction, the deeper right side of the Banyan maze. Cover, elevation, firing lanes. Mercer scanned the geometry of the terrain and saw it. A narrow ravine, choked with brush, steep on both sides. A perfect sniper nest. "He's falling back to a secondary position," Mercer said. "He's guiding us again." Salazar clenched his jaw. "So, what do we do?" Mercer chambered a fresh magazine. "We stop playing his game." He looked toward the ridge opposite the ravine. "And make a new one." He locked eyes with Salazar. "We climb." Salazar stared at the slope, thick brush, exposed roots, slippery mud. "That's suicide." Mercer's eyes hardened. "It's our only chance." The Banyan hunter's rifle cracked again in the distance, closing in. Mercer grabbed Salazar by the vest and started hauling him toward the slope. Because if they didn't get elevation, if they didn't change this fight, then the feared sniper of Quang Tri would finish what he started. Mercer hauled Salazar up the muddy incline boot, slipping on roots slick with morning dew and blood. Every breath came with a stab of pain through his arm, but he kept pulling. He could hear the Banyan hunter cycling another round in the distance, closing in, methodical and certain of the kill. "Keep low," Mercer whispered. "Stay on my heels, don't look back." Salazar groaned, dragging his wounded leg behind him. "Sarge, he's gonna spot us the second we hit the ridge." "That's the plan." A crack echoed behind them, the Mosin again, closer now. A round sliced through a vine just above Mercer's head. Another second. A slightly lower angle. They would have both been dead. But the slope gave them something the Banyan hunter hated: unpredictability. The hunter adjusted his position, scanning the incline through his fogged PU scope, but elevation worked both ways. Shooting upward into brush meant the angles shifted. Lines bent. Cover multiplied. He muttered something under his breath and moved again. Mercer knew they had seconds, maybe less, before he reached the ravine's edge and regained the advantage. Salazar slipped on a root and fell onto his side with a grunt. "I can't, Sarge. I can't go higher." Mercer grabbed his vest. "You can, you will." He dragged Salazar the last stretch until they reached the ridge. The jungle opened slightly, still tight, still green, but giving them what they desperately needed: a line of sight down onto the ravine. Mercer pressed his stomach into the dirt and positioned Salazar behind a cluster of rocks. "Stay here. Don't move." Salazar's breath shook. "You going down there?" "No," Mercer said. "I'm waiting." He checked his remaining ammo. 1 mag. Maybe 19 rounds. Enough if he timed everything perfectly. From below, the jungle exhaled a shift of branches, faint footfalls, the whisper of cloth brushing bark. The Banyan hunter was climbing too. Mercer steadied his rifle. His heartbeat pounded behind his eyes. Sweat trickled into his brow. He forced himself to slow his breath, matching the long, deliberate rhythm of the jungle. Below, a shadow separated itself from the trees. The Banyan hunter. He moved without sound, rifle hugged tight to his shoulder, eyes scanning the slope for any sign of an ambush. Blood still trickled from his arm, but his movements didn't falter. For a brief moment, Mercer admired him. Not the enemy, not the killer, but the discipline, the commitment, the terrifying skill. This was a man who had hunted patrols for years, who could pin entire units with only a handful of shots, who could vanish into banyan roots and reappear on a flank like a phantom. But even the finest hunter had blind spots. Mercer waited until the banyan hunter stepped into a narrow opening between 2 roots, just 1 second of exposure, maybe less. He fired. The shot struck the tree trunk inches from the sniper's chest, but Mercer hadn't aimed to hit. He aimed to force a reaction. The banyan hunter whipped around, sliding behind a tangle of roots. He returned fire instantly, the round cracking through the brush just over Mercer's shoulder. Mercer didn't duck. He repositioned. Salazar watched eyes wide as Mercer rolled to the right, firing again. Not accurate, directing fire. The Banyan hunter crouched deeper, shifting to reposition, and that was when Mercer finally understood the sniper's rhythm. His tells, his pattern, his habits. He always moved with his injured arm toward cover, always pivoted clockwise, always lowered before rising to shoot. Mercer fired into the root cluster just before the sniper emerged for his returning shot. The Banyan hunter hesitated. Just a twitch, just a fraction of a second. And in sniper combat, that was an eternity. Mercer squeezed the trigger. This time the round struck flesh. The Banyan hunter staggered backward, collapsing against a moss-covered rock. His Mosin slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the dirt. For the first time, his breathing broke rhythm. He pressed a hand to his side, blood pouring through his fingers. Mercer didn't move, didn't celebrate. He kept his rifle trained, breathing slow and steady. Below, the Banyan hunter looked up toward the ridge, toward the man who had just beaten him at his own deadly art. His eyes steady, even in pain, locked with Mercer's. There was no hatred in them, only acknowledgement, respect. A silent nod between warriors who had survived long enough to understand there was no glory here, only the jungle's indifference. The sniper exhaled one final breath and went still. The jungle didn't mourn him, didn't whisper his name, didn't honor his years of deadly precision. It simply swallowed him like it had swallowed thousands. Mercer lowered his rifle. Salazar let out a shaky breath. Sarge, is it over? Mercer scanned the ravine. No movement, no leaves shifting, no shadows creeping. Yes, he said quietly, it's over. But as he leaned back and looked into the sprawling jungle below, he knew the truth. For every Banyan hunter, there were others. Men hidden in tree lines, in spider holes, in camouflaged bunkers, waiting with rifles older than they were ready to pin down entire patrols for hours. The jungle was full of ghosts. Some they would defeat, some they would never see. Mercer tightened the strap on Salazar's vest. Let's get out of here. Together they moved back into the endless green. Behind them, the jungle fell silent again.